don't come at me with, I bought a house for $20,000 and then I sold it for $8 million. Hey guys, so I'm going to be going over whether I regret selling my house in the middle of the pandemic, and to be honest, a little bit, because it would have been a little easier staying in the house, and yeah. But basically, the reason I sold my house is because I realized that it wasn't all the money that I was spending and putting into the house, which I think is very manageable. It's not necessarily money, but also time. Time aside from the time that you spend working and earning the money that requires paying off the mortgage. But I would always be cleaning that house. I would always be trying to fix stuff on that house. That sometimes I had to take time off of work. I fell from the ladder one time, and it was just a lot of stuff that has to be done with the house. And for me, living alone, it was a lot. So it wasn't just the money, it was also extra time that I had to put into the house, to something that I wasn't really into. Also, I realized that I was very comfortable. So even though mentally I was pretty stressed out, because I always wanted to make sure to have some type of savings in case something happened with the home, I ended up having to replace the roof on the home, just for peace of mind as well. And that big leak in the garage kind of forced me to. Then you have to look into mold remediation whenever there's some kind of leak. Then there's that one time all those weeds grew, and then all those bugs came. It was sometimes. Anyway, so I was very grateful. I was very grateful for the space that I had, but it was just a lot of space, and I felt like I've always grown up almost just like sharing. I'm a middle child, so I grew up in a 2-bedroom home with like sometimes anywhere between 6 to 8 people living in there all the time. And I also grew up in Mexico as well, and over there you kind of don't have running showers and things like that. When I was super little, you sometimes don't even have running toilets. So I was very stressed out mentally sometimes, and I think I just got into my head with all the money that I was spending and putting into the home. But physically, I was actually very comfortable, because all of a sudden I had all this space to myself, and because I was physically comfortable, I almost felt like I didn't deserve, not that I didn't deserve, but it was just out of, being physically comfortable was out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. I wasn't sharing any space, it was all for me. And at the end of the day, what really changed my math was doing the math. I would much rather invest extra money into investments, buy back my time, and just not be attached to anything or anywhere. You could argue that renting, you get into like 6-month leases, yearly leases and things like that, but you could always rent out a room or do month to month as well. In the future, I probably will get my own apartment, but right now I do have a roommate, and my expenses are super low. I pay about $650 for my rent plus utilities, and at the end of the month, all the money that I have kind of freaks me out a little bit after spending or putting most of it into my house when I had it. I live so frugally, I didn't spend anything on clothes, anything on entertainment, especially with the pandemic and everything. But once I sold the house and I moved in to where I'm living now, again, it's not going to be forever. I'll probably spend more money in future rent later on, but I just really lucked out with the person that I'm rooming with right now. So after I moved out of my house and moved into where I live now, my spending habits have not changed really. The only thing that changed was my living situation. So at the end of the month, keeping my low spending with clothes and all that, etc., I have so much money to invest or save and put aside and it's kind of freaky. Not freaky, but it's kind of weird having all that money. So anyway, I'm just rambling. It's just my random thoughts about selling my home. So at the end of the day, I did the math, and the math made so much more sense to just, since I felt like it was a lot of space, I was paying a lot of money just for space. The math kind of sided with me selling the home and just downsizing significantly to the point where I'm rooming with someone now. Even so, I'm kind of still living a little bit more luxurious because my roommate likes having the air on when it's hot and having the heat on when it's cold. And when I was living in my house, oh heck no, I was putting on blankets, I was putting on sweaters. So I'm technically living a better life right now than I was when I had my house, because I was just super frugal to the point where I didn't even turn on the heater or AC unless it was like below freezing sometimes. But so the math, I did the math, is mentally less debt, having no debt was going to be better for me. The math was better as long as I was rooming with someone else. Getting my own apartment, I admit it's going to be a lot more expensive in the future, unless, you know, you search for those deals. There's always deals to be had. But again, in the future, I'm not saying I'll do this forever, but in the future, I'm free to get an apartment if I want for myself, okay? So don't come at me if I do. So the math was there. And then also, what else was there? Aside from the math, I also took into account my values. So I went ahead and listed out my values, and I keep it on my Google Notes app on the screensaver of my phone. So it's very easy to access, and it's a good reminder every time I kind of miss my little house. But my values included family and relationships. Now, initially I had gotten the house because I wanted my parents to move in with me, but it became really clear that they really liked the apartment, or they preferred their lifestyle down in LA. Their apartments at least have some type of rent control, and they're closer to my nephews and my niece, so I wasn't going to beat out grandchildren. So my initial purpose again was to have somewhere for my parents to go, or retire rent-free, things like that. But at the end of the day, I could just help them out with rent in the future, because they do prefer living in the apartment that they've had for almost 2 decades now, I think. So it didn't really make sense for me to keep the home if no one wanted to come live with me, and it was just going to be for me, right? My next value was health and fitness. Selling the home, getting rid of all my debt really helped me with my mental health. Fitness, I could run around in the streets near the house that I had, and not so much now, but I think it's just, yeah, so selling the home really came down to having good, nice mental health. After that was travel. So if I was going to keep the home, I wasn't going to have much money at the end of the month to set aside for travel, and I really want to prioritize travel. I like mini trips. I don't need like a whole 3 weeks in Europe or whatever. I like going to like local states like Nevada, Utah, Oregon. I want to go visit Seattle. I want to go visit Canada, maybe New York. Those are like my top, at the top. Maybe Yucatan, Mexico. And yeah, I just want to have more time to take mini trips and enjoy other places. The Smoky Cabins of Tennessee, I got my eye on them. And if I kept my house, I wasn't gonna have money to put towards my travel. After that, my next value was being able to give, and I just keep in mind that giving can also mean giving your time, volunteering, things like that, and that can be free. And I really do have that mindset where I could, or even like day to day, just giving kindness to people that don't often get treated kindly. that's part of giving. That's part of what I want to focus on, and it's one of my big huge values. But I could also give money and help with money and things like that. It doesn't always have to be that way, but giving, that one I could have done with the house or without the house, but definitely more with without the house, because now I can also help contribute to my nephew's 529. I can help out my parents if they need money, not necessarily just a shelter. And yeah, and then the next value that I have is trying to always live a minimalist, sustainable lifestyle. So whenever I think about purchasing something like a new phone, which I have been thinking of, I stop myself, because this phone, even though it's kind of wonky sometimes, I think if I buy another phone, all the resources that had to go into making that one new phone and then throwing away, or I don't know, I guess you could sell it, but throwing away, recycling, or selling this phone that's perfectly fine. I don't like reselling, so that's why usually it's not an option. I should get into the habit of reselling electronics, but I haven't yet. Usually I just keep the phone, letting go to waste a perfectly good phone like this and buying something else that's going to take up so much resource from my wonderful planet. It kind of makes me wait a little bit more. Of course, like when my phone dies, which is what happened to the previous one before this one, then I'll go buy a new one. I've had my laptop since 2014. I fixed it once. It cost me $200. So minimalism and sustainability, at the end of the day, it was just me taking up all this space, and it wasn't, I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable paying so much money into a piece of land that didn't align with my values at all. It could have, I could have reasoned. There's so many reasons, like for example, family. I could argue that that house could someday be passed down to my nephew, or my parents would eventually have to be forced to move in with me. I could have reasoned that. With giving, like I said, I guess that really didn't matter. With travel, I could have said, well, I could be super frugal and go camping and stuff, but sometimes nature scares me, to be honest, and ticks and things like that. I don't know. Health and fitness, I could have argued, you know, we're in the middle of the pandemic. There's no safer place to be than in your own home, living alone, self-isolating, right? So yeah, I mean, you could always argue towards the opposite side, but I feel like I'm just I know myself better than anyone else, right? So I know that the argument towards selling the home and just being free would settle best in my heart, or at least my mental health. You're always going to be suffering. There's no escaping it. But it's this type of suffering that you choose. And every time you move through life, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to spend money on things that you shouldn't have. And you're going to learn from it. And you're going to grow as a person. You know yourself best. And that's why I chose to sell my home. Don't come at me with, I bought a house for $20,000 and then I sold it for $8 million, because yeah, that could have been your scenario, your situation, but pretty much now I'm at the end of the stick where I'm looking at properties for $1 million in the ideal neighborhood that I want. So yeah, at the end of the day, you could always argue the other side, but I know myself the best, and I knew that by selling the home was probably the best thing for me. Sometimes I do miss it because living alone is just different, but it is a lot more expensive nowadays. Another reason I sold my house was because I got really, really angry. It's like, I I had to move an hour away from my family just to kind of sort of afford a house. And then on top of that, I'm spending all this money into a piece of land. And I feel like I'm not getting ahead. That's how I really felt. I felt like I wasn't getting ahead despite having my first house, buying my first house at 27, despite being the first person in my family to buy a home. I had literally all I could do was search up on the internet and read as many books, but there's just you can't really rely solely on that. Sometimes you need other people's experience to kind of guide you as well. And I didn't really have that. I was doing it all on my own. And then when you're buying and selling a house, you're also dealing with people that depend on whether this purchase goes through. So that's really what I hated about buying and selling the house. It's just, no matter how nice a real estate agent is or how understanding the buyer or the seller is on the opposite end, at the end of the day, everyone kind of has like a skin in the game. And I just hated that part so much. Anyway, I'm not saying I'll never buy again. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm really glad for this experience because, again, I didn't really have, basically I didn't have anyone to teach me. I tried to Google, I tried to read some things, but it's just different after you yourself go through the process. You kind of learn what you need to pay attention to and all that stuff. But in summary, I'm way more stress-free than I was before, and I'm in a really good place right now. Life is always going to be a struggle. There's always going to be suffering. There's always going to be stress, but I think I made the right decision, even though sometimes I do miss my little house. It was in a really good spot too, unbeknownst to me when I bought the house. Another mistake. But surprisingly, it was very close to Costco and Walmart and all the good stuff, and that's all I need to survive. I'm still close to those stores, but yeah, I feel a lot less stress. I'm very happy, and in the future, I might buy maybe like a condo instead. But yeah, I hope you guys like my rambling on the thought process that I went through when selling my home and where I stand now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Don't be too harsh because I'm just a millennial. That's an excuse for everything. I'm just your average millennial, so yeah, don't come at me. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.